Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to answer some questions. I enjoy doing these kinds of videos because it provides some interaction on the channel here, a little bit of feedback and kind of connecting a little bit better than most of the videos I do here. So let's jump right into it. I will say that I'm sure most of you are asking, where did the beard go? And I'll address that at the end. First question we have here is from Damascus I've or something 8965. I don't know how to say that name, I'm sorry. How do you come up with your Damascus designs for your knives? That's a great question, and I think you're probably referring to most of the different canister pattern welded Damascus projects that I've done on the channel here. And the way I come up with those is I think about this stuff a lot, and I'll have an idea that I think will turn out or look cool, and then you have to go try it. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Some other ideas, I'll see other makers do something. I've got a project idea that I saw a different maker do something, and I want to do my own take on it. Pretty different overall, really, but there's a little bit of that. But a lot of times I'll just think of designs that could be cool, and I think I know how they might turn out, and then you have to go try it. So not a very sophisticated process, but just once you do more projects, you kind of get an idea how stuff might turn out, and it gives you more ideas to try. Second question from John Eisner is, what is the most layers of Damascus you have made a knife from? Of course, we're talking about pattern welded steel here, and the most layers that I have used or made a knife from would be about 400 something layers, not a super high layer count. Reason for that is because most of the time, or so far, when I've been making pattern welded Damascus steel, I'm after a pattern that's something you can see and appreciate for the pattern. Once you get into the really high layer count, you're going into really a different sort of realm of Damascus or pattern welded steel. You get up to the super high layer counts and you get more of a watered or watering pattern, which is actually kind of reminiscent or sort of mimics the original Wootz steel, or even the highly layered and processed, forge processed blades of the Japanese swordsmithing tradition, stuff like that. And you don't get you get a subtle, and there's value to that too. It's just a different look, and I've gone for more of a pattern that you can see and appreciate for that specific characteristic. So different, and that's what I've done. So to ramble on that answer there, the most I've done is about 400 layers, and I usually keep my layer count to about 200. The thickness of stock that you start with, of course, is going to affect this. I am primarily using 1/8 inch or thinner stock when I'm doing a pattern welded Damascus billet starting out. And so with that, once you get up to about 200 layers, you've got a relatively fine pattern, but it's still easily seen and appreciated at that level. And then once you get up, 300 and beyond, you get into more of that washed out or watered pattern look, which I have not really gone for most of the time. So does that answer the question? Hopefully. Third question is, what tools would you recommend for someone wanting to start making knives? Well, this is really going to depend on how much disposable income or cash you have to spend on this new pursuit or hobby, which I'm assuming that's what it is, of course. If you've got, $1,000 that you can go out and spend on, then you might go get yourself a inexpensive forge, something to use for an anvil, maybe an inexpensive grinder, some hand tools like an angle grinder, different things like that. It just really depends, because you can go out and spend $100, get yourself a quality file, a Nicholson file. There is a difference between quality and not so quality files. A hacksaw, get yourself a piece of blade steel. There's all over the internet. You can get just a 12-inch section of 1/8 inch by 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch, 1080 steel, for very inexpensive, relatively speaking. And then maybe like a map gas torch, but what's that, 4 items right now? And then, okay, an inexpensive angle grinder. I have videos on this. I'll put a link in the description below. Budget knife making, very, very inexpensive. So it really depends on how much money you have to start. If you have very little money, you can still start making knives. That's my point. If you have more money, you can buy what you want to buy and go from there. I first started making knives, stock removal, with a hacksaw and a file. That's the tools that I started with. and borrowed, my granddad had a acetylene torch, and he had a shop and everything. It happened to be up there. be able to use that for the heat treating process. You know, it's not as sophisticated as having a heat treat kiln or even a forge, but with proper techniques and the proper materials, you can make a decent knife with very little equipment. It's going to take longer, but that's what it is. So hopefully that helps answer the question. Just depends on what money you have to spend and how bad you really want to do it. It's really what it comes down to. Mule Power Forge says, what's your favorite knife that you made and your favorite knife design? Great question, very difficult to answer, and probably not quite the answer you're asking, because I cannot really come down on a specific design or knife that I have made or that I like the best. I would say the closest thing I can answer is it's really probably the knife that I'm going to make next is my favorite knife, because that is where your emotional and mental energy is focused. You know, whether it's a specific design or technique that you're really interested in and want to try or cultivate and improve on. You know, that could be any number of different things or designs. And so that's kind of where my favorite knife is at the moment. Overall, though, I really do like, I do appreciate practical designs. I'm not into like fantasy knives or just purely art knives. Nothing wrong with that, but that's just not my thing. So I do make fully functional works of art, I guess you could say, even just utility level tools that are highly functional. And so to me, that's what it's about. And then whatever sort of additional design components or embellishment that you might bring to that is sort of just frosting on the cake, and the functional utilitarian aspect is really important to me. So to answer your question, to not answer your question, that's how I would have to say that. Deep Roots Forge asks, how long did it take you to believe your products were, quote, good enough, unquote, to sell? It seems like a number of you are interested in the answer to this question. This is a good question. When I first started selling knives, the knives that I sold are a little embarrassing, quite frankly. Just the overall skill and fit and finish and all of that is far removed from what I'm doing today. I'm sure 10 years from now, I'll look back on what I'm doing today and be like, ooh, that's a little embarrassing. But here's the thing. I was selling a product for a fair price to somebody who wanted to buy it. Now, let me back up. I do think that you need to have a level of functionality. If you're selling a knife as a knife, not just an art piece, if you're selling a knife, it needs to be able to cut. It needs to have some level of decent edge retention, and it needs to have a fit and finish that makes it feasible to use. You know, if you have like sharp edges and unfinished contours and all this kind of stuff where you can't really use the knife comfortably, that's no good. And it needs to be able to cut. So you have to have some level of, you know, competent grind to the blade, and then of course the heat treat. You know, if it's just a soft piece of steel, it's not going to function hardly at all as a knife. And so there's a base level, but once you reach that, and that's what you do through your own testing and function, and show it to other people and have them, hey, try this knife out. What do you think? Feedback, all that kind of stuff. Once you've reached that base level, then from there you're going to continue to improve as you make more knives. And that's what happened to me. I had made knives off and on for years, and I'd made pretty, you know, some decent blades and everything, but my skills and abilities did not really start to ramp up until I had to make, or started making knives on a regular basis, and then selling them. Of course, you're continually, you know, thinking about, okay, how can I make this a better product for the people who are buying it? But what it really comes down to is pricing it appropriately to the person that wants to buy it. And they were happy with what they were getting. They were getting a functional knife. They were happy with it at the price that they were paying. That's really what it comes down to. So, you know, I don't sell any knives for the prices that I did back then. My knives are more money now, and they're worth at least that. But they were worth what I was selling them for back then, and it's a different thing. So there's a continuum, and once you've established that baseline of functionality, in my opinion, this is how I look at it. Once you've established that baseline of functionality, then you price it appropriately and sell it to somebody within that bracket, and then you're going to continue to improve from there. And I have customers you know, that purchased a lot of knives from me back in the day that don't anymore, because I kind of moved out of their, I think I moved out of their price bracket, but that's where my work is now, and that's what it's worth, and it's what I have to sell it for, just on a very practical level to pay the bills and stuff. But you know, in the market of handmade custom knives, you know, they're a quality deal, and you're getting what you pay for. Don Jorgensen, I think that's how you say that, 6393, asks, have you ever made a sword? Great question. These are all great questions, obviously. Yes, I have made a sword. I've made a couple of swords. The first sword that I made, I never actually heat treated because I didn't have the capability. This was years and years ago, and it was sort of a long sword, European style long sword. The second sword, fully functional, full-size sword that I made some other things here and there, but the second fully functional, full-size sword that I made was when I was on Forged in Fire, season 6, episode 8. They had us make basically a military version of a katana or samurai sword, Japanese sword, a gunto, which is a military version of that sword. And that thing, I obviously fully completed, turned out, you know, I had 30 hours, I think it was 30 or 35 hours to make it. And turned out pretty good. It will kill, I think Doug Markita said. And so that was the last sword that I made, which has been several years ago now, and I think it is time to make a sword. I've been aware of that. And I've actually purchased a couple of books by or co-authored with Japanese swordsmiths. I have done some light research on the area of Japanese swords in the past, and I'm looking forward to getting more in depth into that subject in general, and these books will be good because they go into quite a bit of detail right there in the Swordsmith's Forge. So looking forward to getting into those. All right, last question, second to last question. Eric Courtney asked, how many knives do you sell a month on average? Great question. Last year, 2022, I sold a total of 133 knives and then some axes and hammers, and so a total of like 170 something items. Last year, however, I did a lot more YouTube before YouTube once again changed things up on us at the beginning of this year, 2023, right around there. And it was actually a relevant piece of my income in 2022, and it kind of ceased to be that so much in 2023. So all that to say, I've spent a lot more time making product in 2023, and my overall number of items is probably going to be between 180 and 200 items this year. The last several months has been between 15 and 20-ish items, and that includes axes and knives and everything. Of course, that is everything from my least expensive knives, $275, up to, you know, the last higher dollar blade that I sold, the YouTube project, $1,500. That's what that one went for. That's not a catalog. They're all different, but there's a range in there. I try to provide a range of models, sizes, and different things like that. And of course, there's a price range that goes with that. So, but that's the average that I've been at for the last several months. And like I said, we're going to be selling significantly higher numbers of items of knives and stuff this year than I did last year. Yeah, YouTube, that's a whole other subject in itself, but I try to get back into YouTube a little bit more because that does, I discovered once again, that does matter. It drives traffic to the website to sell the product, and so it's kind of a symbiotic relationship, and I just have to keep juggling both sides of it, and that's just the way it is. So that answers that question. And so everybody's wondering what happened to the beard. Yes, I know. So I've been using this Miller powered air purification respirator hood system for almost a year now, I guess. And seemed to be working pretty good for a while. But I don't know. It's kind of a conglomeration of things here. If I flip the camera around, you'll see that I took down the plastic sheeting grinding booth that I constructed, and the purpose of that was to try to keep the grinding dust and grit and particulates off of everything else, like the heat treat kilns and just everything. It was just a layer of filth on everything. Got tired of that. So I was trying to keep it contained. It worked pretty good, but the problem is that once you're in there grinding, especially in that little tiny area, it's like, you know, no bigger than 8 by 8 cube. It's a very concentrated environment with all that particulate grinding dust. And so whatever sort of filtration system you're using, it has to probably work overtime. But a couple of months ago, I was in there grinding and I kept getting something in my eye, or like, you know, because you got the air blowing into your hood there, it's supposed to produce positive pressure and keep anything from coming in, which I'm not 100% convinced that always works, but finally figured out that I didn't have the, my bad, the air filter housing snapped onto the unit all the way. And so the filthy air was just, you know, sneaking by, not getting filtered, and that was special. And so I got that installed properly. It was totally my fault. But after that, I looked at the unit and everything. But then some months later, I was looking at it again because I keep like smelling stuff when I'm grinding. Like, this doesn't seem right. And so I go in there and there's a layer of particulate, very, very fine. It's like soot inside the delivery tube and inside the unit. And so I've been breathing that on some level for a little while. And I know some of it probably had to have come from the incident where I didn't have the filter clipped on all the way, which is totally my fault. But I'm not 100% convinced that that's entirely where it all comes from. All that to say, I've lost confidence in that unit. Even when like checking everything, making sure everything's on properly, tight, all this stuff, you know, have the air going, and I'll be in there grinding, I'll just be smelling this. Like, this isn't right. Something's not right here. Maybe it's just me, but I've like I said, I've lost confidence in the unit, and I don't, you know, I don't know. So I've got myself a normal P100 respirator, and this is going to have to come off too, because that's not going to work even for the respirator. I haven't been doing a lot of grinding the last week because I've been getting some product out and sheaths made and stuff like that. I rearranged the grinding situation, and so there's going to be less actual dust for the filtration system to contend with. So maybe it wouldn't be as big of a deal now, but I have respiratory issues as it is. I don't want to make them any worse, and so you know, I guess that's a price of looking cool with a beard versus being able to have lungs that don't crap out on you before you're 50. Yeah, you know, it's kind of a trade-off, I guess, but I'm kind of leaning this way right now. So that's the story on the beard and the breathing and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully this video was in some way informative and even slightly entertaining for you. Oh, and you know, the beard thing, that's always been a hard part, because, you know, people start making fun of you, and you're like, you look weird and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm like, whatever, kids, you know, just go to your room, stuff like that. So it's hard, but we'll be okay. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching, and I gotta go build something. So we'll see you on the next video.